is January 19th, 2020. My name is Lori Kurtz, pronouns she, hers. Would you please introduce yourself? Say your pronouns if you care to, and tell us all the things you do.
Okay, my name is Holly Day, and my pronouns are she, her. I am a burlesque performer. I am a seamstress, or actually a clothing designer. I am a burlesque producer, as well as, what else do I do? All the creative things that I can think of.
Great. So starting off with a big question, what is burlesque?
That is an interesting question. Burlesque really kind of falls into the beginning back in the early 18th century, actually middle 18th century started. Burlare is the Latin word for to laugh, and it was kind of a satire. What it is now is not what it is then, but it started as from Lydia Thompson coming into the United States, kind of in these risque clothing options. Even like the nude tight was introduced, and eventually, after these women were parading the satirical things that were happening currently, it became synonymous with the striptease. So a lot of times burlesque is it can be anywhere from grungy, gritty to fancy show production, striptease elements of performance art.
Great. And what's the difference between stripping in a club and burlesque stripping?
Sometimes I like to say that if you can fit, I think I've heard someone say this before, but if you can fit your costume in your hand, you're probably not a burlesque performer. There is a lot more detail that goes into a lot of the costuming. Now, that's not to say that stripping doesn't have necessarily those costumes, but burlesque performers are a lot more in control sometimes of why they're stripping, or if they're definitely going to get paid. They're not dependent on necessarily an audience. They're not completely dependent on an audience tipping them per. Most strippers, when they dance, they get paid if someone is going to pay them. And they have to kind of sometimes perform whether or not they're going to. And a lot of times there is more nudity involved, whereas burlesque usually gets down to, at most, pasties and a G-string, depending on the local decency laws.
Right. Yeah. And how do you describe the kind of burlesque that you do?
I do what is known as classic burlesque. There's there's more than two ideologies of burlesque, but it's kind of split into neo and classic, and I typically fall into the more classic style, and that is thought to be more of a kind of a throwback to more of like the 40s, 50s, and 30s era, and with gowns and like beautiful dresses with sparkles and rhinestones, a little more of a parade and peel kind of look, versus neo, which can be more thematic. Maybe like you're a Batman character coming out and you have like big POW signs. That's a little more neo. I think that they're both very valuable, and not one is better than the other, but I typically kind of am drawn to making all the elaborate costumes that kind of are naturally seen with most classic numbers.
Yeah. Well, that partially answers my next question of why burlesque? Why burlesque for you? I
feel like the dancing is okay for me. I really like the costumes. I think that maybe I just really liked all those prom dresses back in the day that you always wanted to have but never could afford to be around, all those really big puffy things, and I was able to kind of get more creative with making stuff and adding all the glitz and the glamour on a regular basis with costumes. That's my favorite part really about burlesque in general, is the creativity that goes into the making of the costumes. And it's actually my most judgy part too. When I see someone who is performing and their costume is, I'm like, oh, come on, the costume. But it doesn't make the performance completely. There is definitely some performances that don't have the greatest costume. The performance is great, but it's my favorite part about burlesque.
Yeah. So where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Seattle, Washington. I grew up in San Diego, though. I was only in Seattle for 3 weeks, so it doesn't feel like it really counts, but somehow it helps appease people who are like, you're a Californian. But yeah, I grew up in San Diego, and then I moved to Seattle when I was 20, and then I moved to Portland a couple of years after that.
Yeah. And are you from an artistic family?
My mom is very artistic. My sister's artistic, my mom's artistic, but not like in the way that I am. What I think is really encouraging about my mom is she always was the kind of person who, for every holiday, she'd always have us make stuff. So there'd always be some sort of crafting, and she still does that with my sister's kids. She'll for Thanksgiving, they'll go for a walk and they'll all pick up pine cones and they'll make turkeys, and then they all, for Valentine's Day, they'll all hand make their cards. So we always did something, and she was always encouraging me that if she wanted something from me, she'd rather it be made than necessarily be bought. And she still, even to this day, is like, you just make me a card, make me this thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so then what did bring you to Oregon?
Initially, a boy. Yeah, and then we broke up, and I liked it here still. I definitely felt like people were a lot kinder. I moved to Seattle because I thought I had been going up and visiting almost every year. As a young teenager, the environment seemed really nice, and when I finally moved to Seattle, I didn't feel that it was super friendly. It felt very cold. I barely made friends. However, I did discover burlesque from Seattle, and then I moved to Portland, and it was just a lot more friendly and what I thought Seattle was going to be.
Yeah. You already described a little bit of the creativity in your family. What else did you do in your formative years that led you to performance?
I wasn't really, I'm not very graceful unless I concentrate with dance, or especially even sports. Like, I cannot catch a ball very well. I played softball one season and was like, I can't do this. My sister was a soccer player. She was a swimmer, and I did not like sports at all. And when I got into high school, you were required to take your first year, freshman has to be PE. I got like C's in PE, and it's not because I was unathletic. I hated running. I hated everything about sports. So when I got to freshman year in high school, you were required to take PE, and you could take dance, but it doesn't count for PE credit until your second year of dance. But you're only required to have 3 years of classes. So I somehow convinced my counselor, begged him, even though it was not allowed, to drop me from PE, and swore up and down I would take dance all 4 years of high school just so that I could not do PE. And I started taking dance classes in high school. As far as other artistic stuff, I've been taking painting and art classes since I was in 6th grade, and took 2 years of AP art in high school as well. Yeah.
And then what, if any, formal education or training did you have in college or anything?
I tried to take a dance class once in college. It was a ballet class, and I just don't have the discipline for ballet in general. Not oddly enough, but if you think about ballet, I have too much of a chest for ballet, and so the positioning sometimes would be so uncomfortable, and I couldn't quite get into the plies with the awkwardness of it. So I didn't take any other dance classes until I was in my 20s. So from graduating at 17 till about 21, I hadn't taken a dance class. And then as far as like costuming stuff goes, like education-wise, I really loved like vintage patterns. I've been collecting vintage patterns on eBay. Somehow my mom has let me have an eBay account for a very long time. And I've been collecting vintage patterns for a very long time. And then one year I really wanted to have like a cape, and I wanted a Renaissance dress. And my neighbor was a costumer, and my mom kind of taught me a little bit how to sew on a machine, but my neighbor taught me how to read a pattern and how to cut everything out and what a pattern meant, like with everything. And so I learned how to know what a grain is and all that stuff just from doing this one item. We didn't do anything more than that. And then I didn't really make anything after that. I sewed a little bit when I was in high school, and then when I discovered burlesque and there was a lot of DIY in burlesque as far as costuming goes, I just was like, oh yeah, I could do that. Sure, I could do that. And I just started experimenting until, I probably couldn't do it, but then I eventually kept doing it until I did.
And so what year and how did you get started in burlesque?
I got started in burlesque. Technically, I got started in burlesque in 2008 when I moved to Seattle. I was very young, met another boy. I got married, and it was a very volatile situation, somewhat abusive situation, and very controlling. And I was going to a class, and I met a woman there who said, this is my divorce lawyer, and you should have him, but also you should come to this burlesque show and come kitten with us because we need someone to help us, and you're cute. And I was like, well, I don't know what that is and what that means, and this is something that my ex-husband would never let me do because of that controlling nature. And I was kind of like, well, I'm going to rebel, and that sounds kind of interesting. So I was like, I'll check it out. I don't really feel comfortable with myself and my body. I don't know if I want a kitten, not knowing what kittening was. And I decided to go down to this show for the first time at the something, I can't remember what it was called. It was in Seattle. It was with this Sinner Saint burlesque troupe. And I came there and I was like, I'm just going to watch. And they said, oh no, we bought you a costume and you're going to go on stage. So my first burlesque show I ever saw, I was kittening, which is when you go and they make you dress cute and then pick up the clothes and just clear the stage and make sure everything works well. And for about a year while I was in Seattle, I was watching this show and kittening and being like, oh, good for them. Good for them. I could never do this. Good for them. So happy. Oh, look at that. Can't believe that person did that. And then eventually kind of started being like seeing all these different bodies and different people doing it and still being entertaining and maybe not being what was traditionally societally thought as perfect. I was like, well, maybe I could do that. I don't know. And then I wanted to take classes, but the classes in Seattle were out of my price range. And so when I decided to move to Portland, Seattle at that time in 2008 had still does, but had like a really prominent burlesque scene, and it has a lot to do with the strip clubs because people can't drink in Washington. I think it has a lot, and also there's a lot of talent, but also because you can drink and go to a burlesque show, and so it became a little more popular and a little bit easier for them to accept this art. When I went down to Portland, there was 7 or 8 performers in 2009 that were performing maybe 1 year before me, and I was like, I mean, not to be cosmic, I was like, oh, you guys aren't very good, like yet. They're actually really good performers. If I named them, they're really great performers now, but they were in their first year, and I was like, oh, no problem. I can be this bad too. It's fine. I can do it together with them. And I didn't take any classes. I debuted with a group of ladies who were doing shows at the Hawthorne. There's a theater in Hawthorne Theater. And I debuted with them, and I just been doing it ever since then. And then a year later, I opened a school, which is a whole nother story.
Well, why don't you tell us that story?
Like if you have been performing in burlesque for a year, it's probably not the smartest thing to be like, you know what, I'm going to start a school. But there was also no one really in the community at that time. Like I said, there was 8 people performing. There was really no one who was teaching. 1 or 2 of them had been doing it for 2 years. 1 had been doing it 1 year. There was like maybe 1 person who had been doing it for 3 years. Everyone was so very new in Portland doing it that no one was teaching. No one was qualified to teach. So I got an email from someone who said, hey, I don't know if you know of anyone who's teaching, but I really want to take classes. And I was like, I like teaching. I was like, I want to teach someday. And I was like, I'm teaching. And what I did is I gathered like an administrator, the most qualified people to teach different aspects in Portland to kind of create a collective, which we started as the Rose City School of Burlesque. And that is what started the school. after about a year, maybe 2 years, I became kind of disenchanted with the school for other reasons, which I'll talk about. But when I first started doing burlesque, I thought I really wanted to be funny, and I would do neo acts, and I realized that I wasn't funny. And I am actually really funny now in a lot of my numbers, but it's really hard to be funny when you're avoiding being you on stage. And that's what was kind of happening, is like I was using props or trying to use something else without putting the funny back on me. And so I didn't really know how to be funny yet. And so I would do neo, and I had this conversation with Charlotte Truce, who was like really into classic, and she's like, "You do classic burlesque?" I said, "No, I don't." She's like, "You do classic burlesque." And I was like, "No, I don't." She's like, "Take a song that's classic and just do your number that you're already doing, because you're doing some modern song. Try it out." And I did it, and that's when I won that award.
What award?
I was accepted to the Great Boston Burlesque Exposition in 2011, and don't do this, but I'm pretty sure that I didn't submit the music that I said I was going to with what I got accepted. But I looked at the competition and thought, they look pretty new. They don't look like there's many classic. I guess what Charlotte said, I did classic, so I could try it. And I gave more classic music for the same number. And then I won most classic, and I was like, well, I guess I do classic. Because it's basic movements of dance into a more classic element. So as I'm learning with the school, I'm growing and learning that we didn't know what we were doing with the start of the school. We didn't know we would teach these long days, and I just felt like the students were dissatisfied because they weren't getting dance practice. There was a lot of talking at them, not a lot of practicality, and I feel like we didn't really give them critique very often. We were like, "You're great. You just have to love yourself, and then everyone will love you." And I don't really agree with that sentiment anymore. And I wasn't feeling super proud of my students because I wasn't able to tell them whether they were doing well or not. So I kind of just was like not feeling very enchanted with that. And so in 2012, I quit burlesque. And I wasn't, we talk about a burlesque community, and I don't actually believe in a burlesque community. I believe it's an industry that we can all love each other, but we start out in this beginning that we're like, we love each other, and that's fine. You don't have to like everyone. That's super normal. We just have to recognize that that's okay. But that's how it was back then, especially when you have such a small community developing. And so I got disenchanted, and I was just like, I don't feel like I belong here, even though I was teaching all these people. I don't feel like I'm able to tell them that they're not doing well. I don't really want to perform anymore. I sold all my costumes. I gave the school up and said I'll sign on as the costume teacher. And 8 months later, I started over. And so I actually was on a break for only 8 months, but I sold my fans, I sold full costumes, and just got rid of it all. I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore, and totally came back, and still I've been doing it since 2013.
And so you started the All That Glitters Dance Studio and Academy.
Yeah, so it was at first just the All That Glitters Burlesque Academy. We eventually had a dance studio, which we no longer have. But yeah, so in 2013, I was like, I don't know, there was like a little bit of an animosity between the other school because I wasn't supposed to not be working for them. However, that has been squashed, and I really like the director currently now. But there was a very tempestuous kind of time that like we were a little bit head to head, and I was like, what are they doing with my school? You know what? I'm just going to start over, and I'm going to start a school that tells people, hey, don't do this. Hey, do this. Gives them critiques, and then makes them do classic first. And that's still the philosophy. So we ask them to do classic first, just like ballet for dance, because if you can do classic well, you can pretty much do anything well, and it will help develop you because the focus will be on you versus the focus on if you're a mad scientist and you have a million props. So that's when we started the school. And then a few years later, I had a crazy idea that I was like, I need to have my own dance studio. We started in bars. We started teaching. Rose City started at the Bossa Nova Ballroom, and I bought a bunch of mirrors from like a repo center, and we would pull them all out and do it in the bar and then have our recitals there. And then we did at the Analog when we did All That Glitters. We just would teach in bars because we didn't have the money to rent studios. And then we finally switched to studios, and then I was like, I need my own dance studio, and we got it, and I lived above it, and it was great for the classes, but we also wanted to teach like weekly classes, and our community wasn't really into just taking straight up classes on a consistent basis, and it wasn't just affordable to keep having my own studio. Yeah. So we're back to renting, and it's totally fine, and it's still successful. It's kind of nicer not to stress out about making sure everything's rented all day.
So what is the curriculum at a Burlesque Academy? What classes do you teach, and what do they cover? So currently our curriculum covers several things. We do have it in 6 weeks. I feel that we used to have, Rose City was like, I think we went from 10 to 12 weeks to 10. And then I think that they do it 8 weeks now maybe, and we do 6. There's so much information to cover that by the time you get through 10 weeks, it's like exhausting, and I feel like there's a higher dropout rate of being too much information. 6 weeks won't cover everything, so what we go through is we start with some basic movements, introductions, history, a little bit of history. We ask people to look at different artists for their inspiration. We start with beginning costume concepts with simple save your money 5 feet rules, which 5 feet from the stage is what looks good. Then we go over like a vocabulary of dance, different kind of things that they can use when they're thinking of their choreography. We make them go over how to enter and exit a stage. We make them go over how to pose, how to deal with when the music just stops on you, or how to deal with if the music repeats on you. And we go over more advanced costuming, hair, makeup, and then we have them create their own acts, which we go and we critique. We do some one-on-ones as well. Their own acts, we have them choreograph as much as possible, and then we kind of do some one-on-ones to help them get on stage. And our goal for All That Glitters is to get on stage. So in the first class, I always go, you guys realize you're going to be performing in front of an audience, right? And they go, oh. And I usually say, you're going to all perform, right? Nod your head. Look in my eyes. We're going to do it. And they're just like, I don't know. And then we have a good turnout of people that do end up performing at the end. Sometimes people drop out. Life happens. It's scary. But they all go through the scariness together. That's great. Yeah. That's great. And do you teach all the classes?
I teach all the classes, but I sometimes have help. I've had some different professors over the time. Currently, I have Kissy LeMay helping me with my classes, and she is actually a former student of mine who has graduated both the 101 and the 201 classes. And then I also teach a 4-week fan dancing workshop. We sometimes have guest instructors come from out of town. We offer workshops through them. Those ones I obviously don't teach. I just kind of facilitate. And then I think that's pretty much it for the teaching of the classes. I do one-on-one sometimes, private lessons. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And how many classes a week is that for you?
Right now, we just do one at a time. Sometimes when we do the 201, we do it concurrently with the 101, so it's 2 classes a week. I don't really have the time to teach too many classes, and we need to make sure we fulfill enrollment statuses to make sure there's enough to make it worth it. Yeah.
And so if you don't have the time to teach more classes, what are you doing with the rest of your week?
I am so busy. Let's see. I can give you like what I did this week.
Sure.
I made a caftan, a t-shirt. I made 3 bras, 2 pairs of panties, a pair of gloves. This is all orders I had to do. Sewing. I did a 5-hour photo shoot, coached 22 girls on 11 girls on how to do 22 poses. Not even 22 poses because you have to switch. Those are 22 looks that they got approved for those poses. And I run a social club. I take Tahitian and hula dance classes each week. And sometimes I also work at a club. And then I also currently am working at a shop where I'm taking alterations and doing some alterations, and also potentially going to be putting some of my clothing into the shop.
Wow. So tell me about your costume business. How did that start?
I started that because I was so excited about making all the costume things when I started burlesque that I just started making pasties. Pasties were the first thing I started making for other people, and I feel like Emperor Fabulous was the first person I made pasties for, and I also feel like they might still have them. So I used to make some pasties, and then I've had this shop open since 2010. I started putting things on Etsy, doing some basic shrugs. There was in that time frame, I feel like there was a lot of small little hats and shrugs and little bustiers, very, very Western burlesque looking stuff. That was the popular thing. So I would make some of that stuff, and then eventually it came down to sewing underwear, triangle bras, trying to do more classic style costuming. So my shop for costuming is very classic style orientated with different panty styles. I have hair flowers, gloves. I make fur boas. Sometimes I make vegan organza boas. I make wraps as well. So I think sometimes I diversify myself too much. I have too many things that I make. So it might be confusing as to all the things I could do. But I'm I probably do that,
Great. So you talked a little bit about the burlesque scene here in Portland. How has it changed, if it has, since 2008?
I don't want to toot my own horn completely, but I feel like by having the schools, I have been a big part of the expansion. And it wouldn't have happened. I know there's a lot more performers, but they wouldn't have happened if they hadn't taken classes. There are definitely performers who started performing in Portland that didn't take any of the classes, but for many of the years, I had a hand in a lot of performers getting out there, and there are performers who still perform today from back when they first started. So just the fight we had to go through to get people to come to our shows, which we still have, but because Portland is such a strip-heavy place, there would be articles. Oh my gosh, I remember there was an article in the Willamette too, one that was talking about how burlesque is just for fat people to dress up. It was a little blurb saying that it was probably more an opinion. It wasn't someone's article. It was more someone's they write in and do that little opinion where it's about just fat people getting to dress up, which was really offensive because of course we all shared it at the time. It was look at this. And then the Willamette was doing this thing. No, Mercury, not the Willamette. The Mercury was doing this thing where they would try to get people to vote them into the worst event. So think of the worst event, and they would try whatever was voted the most terrible event, the writer would have to go to it and have to experience it and write an article. And one of the suggestions they put was a burlesque event. And I remember the producer of one of the big shows at the time, we were let's fight this. Let's all vote for this, and let's show this person what this is. And they actually rewrote the article and were I actually had a great time. And it was great because we had been fighting for a long time. And the Mercury and the Willamette are not like that now. We had been fighting for them to come to these shows and experience that. It was a lot more fun. But to be fair, we were all new. We were all inexperienced. It probably wasn't the best shows to come to. And probably some of the the talent wasn't quite there yet, and that's, accurate. But it also was hard to get people to say, why would we go to a burlesque show when we can go to the strip club and see everything? And trying to explain, well, it's more of like, not about the fact that they stripped, but about how they stripped. So that was a big challenge in the beginning. So that's one of the things that changed. As far as like burlesque outside of Oregon, or just burlesque inside of Oregon has changed?
Just, if you have an opinion about outside.
I feel like there is a lot more acceptance, and I feel like there's not a lot more acceptance in burlesque bodies. So we have like these two competing ideologies of being like, we need to have more diversity, and that's great. Like, I think that's great, but then we still have our headliners who all look the same. And the same group of people get to do the same things, and the same headliners. And so it's frustrating because when you come into the burlesque and you start looking at the people who are being celebrated and they don't look like you, representation matters. And there are definitely performers who don't look like that, who are amazing, but are not being showcased still, and they're still fighting for that. So there is still like, yes, we're going to do those things, but we're still fighting the same exact tropes that happened when the people who win look exactly the same. And that's really frustrating for me and for a lot of people, and just looking at the body types that you have to fit into to become a headliner.
Right.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about audience. Who have you observed is typically drawn to burlesque as an audience?
Oh, I feel like it's for men and women, and like them. It's kind of for everyone. I mean, they're the fashion that happen. I don't know. I think it happens where like sometimes it's possibly the men who are like, I want to see this thing happen, right? And for women, they're like, I want to see what they're wearing and how they got out of that thing. But it's all cheeky and fun, and really, I feel like it's a really great audience. I know that when I first started doing burlesque and my mom found out that I did burlesque, she was like, I just don't want someone to say something derogatory about you. What if I'm in the audience and they say something terrible about you and I'm next to them? I'm going to punch them. I can't go. And I was like, they're not like that. It's a very different audience than more like in the club. That is more likely to have something, terrible said to you, and you have to be like, oh yeah. But if a thing like that was said to me in the club, it's so much more choice. Like, I mean, not in the club, but in a burlesque performance, there's so much more choice in me being like, you can't talk to me like that. And there is some choice depending on where you're at in the club wise, but it's hard to tell when I think that dancers aren't treated super well in general, but burlesque performers are treated a lot better, which is unfortunate. However, historically, they weren't treated well either. So it's because of the revival, and some of it has to do with the notion of saying that burlesque is better than dancing, or that I'm not a stripper, I'm a burlesque performer, and that mentality probably has aided in the better treatment. However, it's still hurting the same industry and the same godmother, historically.
Yeah. So when did the Oregon Burlesque Festival begin? How did that all come about?
It began in 2013, and a couple of friends, performers, decided that we just wanted to. There was no festival happening in Oregon. There's no other big event. There was no festival happening really in Seattle. There was the Moisture Festival at the time, but nothing else really happening in Seattle. A lot of other places had festivals, and we just went, why not? Let's do it. And we just decided to put it together and see what happened. We had a connection with the venue, and we did we did 3 nights the first time. We did like two different venues, 3 nights. I remember the venue that we were at in the beginning was like, are you sure you need like 2 nights? And we're like, yes, we need 2 nights. And then we wanted 3 at the time, but we were like, we need 2 at least. And then after, they're like, you can come back next year. And we're like, okay. So It definitely was like an evolution of just a couple of friends decided to do it together. And really, when you do a festival, all of the production is taken on by that team, and all of the financial liability and responsibility is taken on by that team. And so it's really stressful. It's not a really big money maker. But it was rewarding. I did the artwork for year 1, year 2. I don't think I did it for I did paintings. I did big paintings. And then I digitalized them. And that was the artwork for those years. I don't think I did it for year 3. I think I was like, I think we should hire someone at that point. And then I did the artwork this last year too. Yeah.
So how does one go about putting on a festival? What are the steps? What are the considerations?
I mean, a website. You really got to secure your venue. This is our 7th year, and so what we're doing now is so different from what we were doing then, and it has a lot to do with, again, growing and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. Bless the last venues place. They were wonderful. The stage was wonderful, and it's not even their fault, but their backstage was really hard to be in because it's a historic building, and historic downtown Portland is old. And honestly, most of downtown Portland probably needs to be torn up and rebuilt. I know that's terrible to say, but when you can smell the sewage from the street, it's rough. So, this venue though was like a rock and roll venue, right? So I remember either year 2 or year 3, we had to go back down into the basement because there was drawings on them. Well, there were stickers, like band stickers all over the mirrors. So you can't see yourself. And there was also this drawing of this woman with her legs open. And we were just people who are not used to this venue are coming outside from all these other places. They're coming to this kind of grungy rock venue, and that's not what they're expecting from a festival. So we went down there and we were cleaning all the stickers off. We were vacuuming and spraying it. And, in the summertime, it doesn't matter what you do. It can smell really bad just because of downtown Portland. Yeah. So, those were some things that we had to do, some steps that we had to first you have to also decide your applications, what you want to have, what you can't have, how many people that you can have per night. And then it's hours of watching all these videos and trying to figure out, I still do this sometimes where you're watching it and you're like, is this good? I can't tell. I've watched 17 videos. Is this good anymore? I gotta stop. If I can't tell if it's good, I'm just gonna go back to it. Because you get kind of burlesque burnt out of just watching it over and over again. One thing I have learned is that if you're not entertaining in the first minute, I don't want to watch the rest of it. And maybe as an audience member, that's not a big deal, but when you're watching 17 videos in a row and nothing's happening for the first minute, you're like, what is going on? So you watch a bunch of videos, you got to send out a million emails being like, so sorry, you didn't get in, congratulations, you got in. The first several years, the first 4 years, we didn't pay anyone. We only were able to pay the venue and the headliners and somewhat ourselves as well. That was the hope. You have to pay for posters and all those other things and all the promotion stuff. What other steps are there? I mean, getting a stage manager, getting people to help you with kittening, getting people to help you with badges, checking people in, getting your lineup, getting your music. This venue, we were the person that actually did the music. So somebody to press play, somebody to start the songs, getting your MCs set up, who's gonna keep the show rolling, who's gonna make it entertaining, who's gonna be able to fill the spot. And the first few years, we had 20 to 25 performances a night. It's so long. So you gotta keep rolling, and we don't have that many this now. I mean, we do have we actually did. We had 20. We had 22. We still had 22. We went down and then back up, but the caliber performers that did apply, we were like, how can we say no So, trying to figure all that. You do get some money when people apply for a festival, and that really helps to deal with some of the upfront costs. But in general, it's just a lot of work. Yeah.
Do you put money up front and then hope to recoup?
Yes. What we've done in the past is held on to some money from what we've made and just kept that and then put that towards it too. But whatever that doesn't cover, we'll put money toward, like if we have to put something on our credit card for a flight, we have to go buy that flight now. We can't wait until we get paid and hope that it comes out. We got to get the Airbnb for the headliners. We got to get the place they're going to stay. We got to put the deposit down on the venue. Those are more considerations that we have to do. We are in a different venue now, and they were so happy with us. They asked us to come back within 2 days of the production. Yeah.
That's amazing. Back in 2008, in the early days when you were starting out in burlesque, was it like a hard sell to educate venues and have them have shows in their bars? And
yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that we had to do, we only had a couple of places to do them, was we call a door split, where we try to figure that out. A lot of times venues would try to charge us a lot of money, and we're like, well, we don't know if we can get people in here, like what's going to happen with that. It still can be a hard sell. I recently went to a venue. I was like, this will be a really great show for you guys. It's going to be a happy hour show. They're like, yes, we want you, but we don't want you to have a door person. And I was like, will you help us pay for the sound person that you are requiring? Well, you can pay it out of the tips you make. So you're not going to help us pay for the door person. Like, it just, it's still continuously like that misunderstanding of like trying to figure out like how we can't give you money if we can't charge people, So I'm still working on that venue. Hopefully we get it, because that would be really fun.
Yeah. So you mentioned the festival where you won the competition, Most Classic. Mm-hmm. Do you still perform at festivals and travel around?
I do. I am leaving for Minneapolis. It's not completely a festival. It's called the Pink and White Ball. It is a fundraiser for Planned Parenthood, but you do have to submit. You didn't have to pay to submit, but you do have to submit to be part of it. It is a small honorary stipend to perform there. Not very much, but kind of like an honorary to be like in there. And the thing about festivals and not getting paid for them is we talk about exposure. And while I do agree that everybody should get paid, the festival is kind of the best way to get exposure in the way that you want to get hired in that places again, because of festivals I performed in, I've been hired outside in those cities because I've met people. I also just did Theater Bizarre, which was in Detroit. I did St. Louis last year for Show Me Burlesque Festival. I did New Mexico. So last year I did New Mexico, Show Me in St. Louis, and Theater Bizarre. And then I have Minneapolis on my books. And I have applied for a couple other ones, but I don't like to talk about them unless I get in.
So when you're creating a new piece of burlesque, what's your process?
Costume. I'll think of something I like costume wise and usually be like, oh, I'm going to make a costume of that. However, my last complete act, I've made a costume for a new act recently that I haven't done a number to. I just waiting on finding the right music. But the last complete number I did was Lime in the Coconut, and I did a Lucy act just recently. I just did an I Love Lucy act with Vitamin Vegemin. And I had that costume piece for 2 years. I just didn't know what I was doing with it. So I'll just make costumes sometimes and like hold on to them, or like be in the middle of different things and then making it into something. But with the Lime and the Coconut, I was like, I want another tiki type number. Wouldn't it be funny if I was like doing this thing where I was a coconut and every time I pulled off something, just a bunch of limes came out? And so I come out with a big, huge coconut on my head, and then I open up the coconut and there's a big lime inside. Take off my gloves that are brown, and there's limes all over my arms. My skirt unravels completely. and then my corset comes off and I have more coconut shell bra and more limes, other limes. So yeah, definitely though, when I think of creating something new, it has a lot to do with costume first. Costume forward. Some people are music forward. I'm usually not. They'll hear a song and be like, I want to do this song. I'm going to make a thing. But I actually have one number right now that's song forward that I'm waiting to figure out the costume. We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've mentioned tiki dances and now a tiki costume.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about that, aesthetic that appeals to you?
It's totally an escapist vibe. We live in the Pacific Northwest. It's very rainy. I really like the idea of the flowers, the tropics, of water. I don't like the beach. I love the ocean. And so I like being in the water and swimming, but I don't like being sandy. And so the whole tiki thing is this whole other vibe. I think it's okay. I like learning about all this stuff. I like doing tiki stuff. I think it's, if you do like tiki, that you should be educated with all the things that are wrong with tiki, and meaning that there were a lot of historically terrible things that happened in the Polynesian cultures because of colonization. And it's really important to understand that you can enjoy the good parts of stuff as long as you know the history, so you don't repeat the history.
And so that's an aspect of the cultural appropriation conversation that people are having. Yeah,
I mean, in my retro stuff and lifestyle, it's like I like the retro vibes. I don't ever want to live in the 50s. I like the clothing and the designs and the shapes, but I don't want to continue those values, retro styles and retro values, and that has a lot to do with cultural appropriation is a really hot button in burlesque. Because there's like culture appreciation, culture appropriation. How do you deal with liking something that you love that you're not a part of necessarily and trying to be inspired by it? It's a really fine line, and you have to figure out like what do you decide to educate yourself on? Are you taking a full thing? Are you disrespecting it? Are you making fun of it? Yeah.
So that leads us into diversity. Portland and Oregon is a pretty white state.
Oh yeah, I was gonna be like, no, it's not diverse. Not very diverse, yeah.
Right. So you're in a position of you're educating in your school. You're running a festival. How do you achieve addressing diversity in what you do?
It can be really difficult as someone who is a white cis female. Like I can only recognize my privilege so much, where it's like I can recognize it and try to do stuff, but I can't solve everything. I can just only be out there and be like, yes, I will listen, But some of the things that have been really neat that we've implemented is adding a POC free application period. And for that, just being able to allow people who have been systematically just treated poorly to have more opportunity without having to pay, because there's all those reasons why it's a lot more expensive a lot of times for POCs. So that has really been great. And that I credit to a couple of my team members who are POCs for being like, we should do that. And me being like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Like, and I didn't even think about that before. It wasn't my idea. And having it in there, I was like, this has been the most diverse festival we've ever had. I do typically always have POCs in my burlesque shows, and I don't pick them because they're POC, but I also am like, hey, you're amazing. Come be part of my show. The hard part is that there is a good amount, but like it's hard not to pick the same people, because there's not a ton of people in Portland who are burlesque performers who I can be like, let's do this thing. I mean, I want to be well-rounded in all my shows in both diversity racially and body, because that also is a big thing that I notice when people they all have the same look in the show, whether like they're POC or not, they have the same skinny body. They notice that too. So I try to like think about that when I'm casting. I also still always want to have the same caliber for all the performers, regardless of whatever's happening. So there's a lot of different challenges. I believe every body type can be a good burlesque performer, but not everybody can be. So just because of those things doesn't mean you're a good performer. Same thing as there's skinny white women who perform, I don't think, that are very good. Yet they do get more opportunities, unfortunately, because of that, which is really frustrating. But trying to like put that out there, I mean, I just try to add inclusion in all the things I do. One of the things that I really wanted in year 4 of the festival was I didn't want a white woman. For the first 2 to 3 years, I was painting them. I painted what I know, right? Like I know myself. But I also was like, I don't want a white woman as the color to represent the festival. And so I got an artist in somewhere to paint like 3 women, and they were purple and pink and blue. And then one of them was, and then the other one the year before, she was, I think she was still white. I really didn't want just a white woman to represent the logo of the festival. I also, like for my pinup group, we were doing faces, and I wanted to not just have 2 white women, but I have a girl with pink hair. I have a girl who is a POC, but I also cut off their bodies so that you didn't have to judge what their body type was, and you just judge them like by the top half. So you're not like, oh, are they really tiny, and that's what you're doing, and that way we can have more body inclusivity as well.
Yeah, cool. So people in burlesque say it empowers them. What's your take on that?
I think it can empower people. I think that it definitely, I think it is a weird conversation to have, or to see, when burlesque is your therapy and it's not about the audience. What happens, I believe, is that if you love your audience, they will love you back. But if you just love yourself on stage, then you're just, excuse the term, you're just masturbating on stage, and I don't want to watch you do that. I want to watch you like interact and be part of it. And so sometimes it empowers people in a way that can be negative, but I think most of the time, like that kind of like, I'm the best, I'm everything. But most of the time, it allows a platform for typically female performers or female identified performers to not be repressed societally by what's going on with just being told that they're not allowed to be naked. They're not allowed to show their bodies. They should be ashamed of what they're doing. And that is really empowering to be able to like, no, I can do whatever I want with it. This should be normal. This shouldn't be something that we have to hide or be ashamed of. My skin shouldn't be something we're ashamed of. I should be ashamed of the violence that's happening, not the thing that's happening that's a natural part of human behavior. And that could be really empowering, I think, for a lot of people. And also just being able, that's why I say that you say when people are empowered, being able to see all these body types. But what happens when I say negatively is that sometimes we see the same body type. And yeah, it's like empowering you get to do that thing, but then you're like, why is it that one type, that one person type that's happening, then getting the headlining spots or whatever. So that could be really frustrating. And you know, I mean, I don't really know how to combat that, you know, because that's what gets hired. But I don't think that's what all people want to see. And I feel like that's a testament to when you see a show and you see a performer who is not whatever you expect it to be. And you're like, that was amazing, because we are not all the same shape. We're not all the same size. We're not all the same everything else. So, yeah.
And so that what you're talking about dovetails into how burlesque can be a force for social change.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with social change, there is festivals that have gone down who refuse to participate in social change, who refuse to recognize things that are possibly problematic. And it is really important to, if there's something wrong or you're hurting someone, to be like, yeah, maybe that wasn't your intention, but you still hurt them. So why can't you do something about that? Like, doubling down is just like the worst thing. And I see it so many times. And so we've together bonded together. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than it should, but bonded together to be like, hey, like, this is not okay to have something that depicts somewhat racial aspects, you know? I mean, there are performers in France who are still doing blackface and don't see what the problem is. I understand that maybe it's because they haven't been in this culture where they are able to see like how hurtful that is, because they're completely separated and they're just trying to be like, they don't understand like the history of what blackface is, because it is a whole history. But at the same time, the inability to recognize that you are still being hurtful is really difficult. And I think that we have a lot of voices in burlesque to be able to make that social change, to say that's not okay.
So that leads into the second to last question about what are the challenges facing burlesque today?
Some of the challenges are oversaturation and, you know, what is our market to get people out in the stands, right? Like, I try not to put too much stuff on YouTube, and it has a lot to do with, I want you to come to the show. You know, I don't want you to watch all my things on YouTube. Television was the original, and movie theaters was the original thing that killed burlesque in the first place. And if we're just going to give away that content, why do they have to come out to go see it? I mean, that's what's hurting live theater too, you know? So, and the oversaturation part of it is that I don't think it's wrong to educate and have people join burlesque classes. It's super fun and amazing. We also need to produce and hire the people that are going to continue to perpetuate good performances, but allow continued teaching to get them to be there as well. So what happens is there's a lot of shows happening at the same time, and what do you go to? What's a good show to see? In general, I feel like the producers here are they've gotten to be a little more picky, which I'm grateful for, in a way of like seeing what showcase and being like, okay, most of these performers I enjoyed watching, which is great. Because that's the person, Joe Schmo down the street, and comes in the audience and is like, I've never seen a burlesque show. Okay, this is what the burlesque show is. That's what I think about when I do my shows. When there's someone who's never experienced it and they see a show and if they don't know it's a bunch of inexperienced people, what are they gonna, but I also want to give a platform to be like, hey, this is the newbie showcase, or this is a thing, because then they know, and it's like, hey, they're doing this for the first time. This is like, they're just starting to do this, and they're getting that experience, because, you know, how can you get better if you don't get that experience? So that's one of the biggest challenges too, is especially in different states, is just figuring out how to navigate that and getting butts in the seats, as well as undercutting. And undercutting happens when a performer says, you should pay me this much money, and then newbie over here says, I'll do that for half as much or free, and not valuing that time. I mean, that happens in a lot of industries, honestly. Almost every industry is somebody's trying to come in and get the opportunity, and eventually it doesn't really work out for anyone. So that has always been a challenge. It's just being able to say we're being paid. I mean, the amounts of money that was being paid before is definitely not the same that is now. So I don't think you can make a living being a burlesque performer. Just a burlesque performer. No other avenue of income. There's very few people who are only performing, not teaching, and just touring. Very few people. Mm-hmm. Even Dita Von Teese has other avenues of income.
So final question, what do you wish the general public would know about burlesque or understand?
It sounds so serious what I was talking about before, but it is a lot of fun to experience. I mean, you feel like you're part of something, versus sometimes in the theater when you're watching something, you're just like watching a show and you're just in your little world, but you're involved. You're part of the show in this kind of theater. So it's a lot more exciting, and sexuality is funny, sexuality is silly, sexuality is serious, and so having that up there is kind of just getting a human experience and getting to laugh and have levity about the whole situation, or even sometimes, performance art can be really serious, burlesque. A lot of feelings when you watch a show, and most of the time they are good, whether it's medium quality to high. So it's really fun to go out there and see a show, and I would like the general public to, that's a really wide range, but the judgment of dancing and what it is, it's not so high in Portland or in Oregon. I feel like we're pretty open-minded, which is really wonderful about this area. But outside of here, some places, the blue laws that restrict women's bodies are really upsetting, and we shouldn't, I don't feel like we should have them the way that we do in a lot of other places that are restricting something that is supernatural.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you.